Hello, my fellow geeks. You are listening to the Indian AvGeek, and I am Vishal Mehra. Another action packed week in Indian aviation with proving flights in Noida, more aircraft for Air India, and so much more. So much going on, and I have just the right person to discuss all this with. This week, I'm pleased to welcome Jagriti Chandra, one of India's best known aviation journalists, writing for The Hindu. Jagriti has spent 15 years in the media industry, half of which was in television. Based out of New Delhi, her primary focus is on policy matters impacting aviation and air travelers. Some of her stories that have been widely shared and read include the story on how the Indian Air Force's Jamnagar Airport was declared international for the Anant Ambani pre-wedding bash, as well as how passengers were being enrolled for Digi Yatra without their consent. Jagriti, I'm so pleased to welcome you to the show.
Hi, Vishal. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Looking forward to a fabulous conversation on my favorite topic.
You started your career back in 2009 at Times Now. Were you always keen on covering aviation, or is it something that happened to you, or you developed this interest along the way?
Yeah, so to answer your question, no, I absolutely never ever had any interest in aviation, and it just happened to me. You mentioned Times Now. Yes, I started my career as a producer for a news television channel. It was initially Times Now, and then I moved to CNN IBN, and for a very long time I was a behind the desk, behind the camera sort of person. So I would produce shows, but I did always intend to become a reporter. And over a period of time, about 3-4 years into this role at CNN IBN, there was sort of an opportunity to join the city team at CNN IBN. And what happens quite often when you're a city reporter is that you're either covering crime or you're covering say local politics or say the civic body and associated issues, and so very often what would happen was that I would be asked to do uh, morning fog coverage. So what happens in news bulletins is that as soon as a new day starts, the challenge is to replace the previous day's news with new news. And one of the first things that happens is that you wake up at 6-7, you realize, oh, we are fogged out, and let's cover that. So I would be sent out. I started doing reporting in the month of December, January. So yeah, so I was the one most frequently asked to go and do fog coverage, and we'd have to sit before the computer as well to sort of study the Delhi airport, arrivals and departures data to understand what the delays and cancellations were like. So that's how my aviation reporting started. And then I would be assigned, other funny aviation incidents or that would happen. So like a rodent inside a passenger cabin, and so mostly sensational stuff that makes television news. So it all started with that. And over a period of time, I realized that I wanted to sort of understand the subject in greater depth. And that's how I transitioned also from television to print, and gradually started exploring the subject more seriously.
How do you think Indian aviation has changed, especially since you started covering it around 2016?
I started covering aviation seriously from 2016 onwards. And from 2016 to 2024, it's been an 8-year period. And if you recall, I think between 2005 and 2015 is when we saw a large number of airlines launch, whether it was, Ajay Singh acquiring Modi Luft and giving us a Spice Jet, or whether it was Indigo, born in 2006, whether it was Kingfisher Airlines or whether it was Air Asia, which launched services in 2014, or Vistara that launched services in 2015. All this had actually happened before I started reporting, the year 2016. And since 2016, if we are just to look at some of the landmark events in Indian aviation, I would say it would be the demise of Jet Airways in 2019, or privatization of Air India in the year 2022, or the Go First shutting down in the year 2023, and in the year 2024, Air India able to merge with Vistara as well as achieve the merger of Air Asia India and Air India Express. So if 2005 to 2015 was the period of crazy explosion of new airlines, the period between 2015 to 2024 would be a period of consolidation, where eventually you are looking at two strong players. So what is now being called increasingly as a duopoly, because you have Air India and Indigo controlling almost 90% of the market share. So that is how I would describe the changing landscape ever since I've started covering aviation, Vishal.
Do you have a story or a news item that you have covered in these years, in these 8 years, that you're fond of, or that you look back with fondness, or that you're proud of? Maybe fondness is not the right word. Could be some stories that aren't so pleasant, but something that you're proud of.
Yeah, so I would say that partly because of my association with the Hindu, and partly because of just the person I am and my own background, of the kinds of topics that I was covering before I started covering aviation, I like to explore aviation through a more human lens. So I like to sort of explore not just planes and business plans of airlines, but also understand people issues as well as policy issues. And so, therefore, one story that really stands out for me was the story of this trans person called Adam Harry, who wanted to become a pilot. This is somebody who was born as a female, or he was, or one can say that was assigned female at birth, but identified as a man. And this person nurtured the dream of becoming a pilot. And he had a PPL with him and wanted to apply for a commercial pilot's license. And this person went to the DGCA to appear for the medical examination. I think it was the class 2 examination. And that's when he started to face, obstacles. Um, so this person was undergoing, sex affirmation surgery, or hormone therapy rather. So his gender transition had already begun to happen because he was going through this hormone therapy. And so even though this person was born as a female, now he's displayed certain male anatomical features. So there was facial hair and there was male voice, all of those things. But before him was this document where he had to enter his gender and he could only say female. And as a female, when he appeared before the examiners, they started mocking him, making fun of him, or they were confused how to deal with his unique case. Eventually, he was asked that he should stop his hormone therapy if he wanted to become a pilot. And he said that he came out and he thought that he would do that, and he did pause his therapy and then applied again and then went through, and then he realized that he didn't want to have to sacrifice his gender identity to fulfill a dream. And we wrote about this story. It was a front page story. It was our lead story on the front page, which means it was right below the masthead, where it says the Hindu. So from right at the top, from left to right, a massive spread. And the story just went viral. Every media channel picked up the story. I think the BBC picked it up as well. This person was interviewed by all important media organizations, and and what happened, what was really beautiful about this was, as a policy reporter, you very rarely see an actual change happen in terms of rules and regulations. After the story, the Social Justice Ministry wrote to the DGCA, you know, demanding that there should be medical guidelines prepared for trans persons to enable them to become pilots, or to procure a license that the DGCA gives to aviation personnel. And over the next 4 to 5 weeks, the DGCA actually came up with their first medical guidelines for trans persons, which would effectively allow Adam Harry to become a pilot. From what I remember, the guidelines said that if you're undergoing such a hormone therapy, you will not be ruled out from applying for the medical exam. And even if you had completed the hormone therapy, you could also still apply for the exam. So that to me was one of my favorite stories. But a more sort of another story that went really viral was earlier this year. This was about the Jamnagar airport, and the wedding excitement of Ambani's son, Anant Ambani, and guests from all over the world, the who's who arriving into that airport. So we wrote about the kind of hectic preparations that were made to host all these guests and to host hundreds of aircraft that would arrive over those 3-4 days. And the story was that the airport, Jamnagar airport, was turned into was given an international status for about 10 days. And so the kind of resources that were pressed in to enable a business tycoon to host his private guests, or even the access that was given, because Jamnagar is an IF airport. So the access that was given to the military area, which is called the technical area, where you have fighter jets parked, etc. So that really shook everyone. And yeah, the kind of response that I saw for that story was just amazing.
Is Adam Harry now a pilot? Is he on his journey now of becoming one? Are you guys following up on that?
Yeah, so I'm in touch with him. He is training in New Zealand to be a pilot right now. I think, decided not to train in India, but train in New Zealand. So that is what is going on at the moment.
All right. Well, best wishes to Adam on his journey. And what's also amazing is Air India ordering some more aircraft, Jagriti. We remember, I think last year, early 2023, Air India announced about 470 aircraft order. There were 250 from Airbus, there were 220 from Boeing. What has happened recently is Air India has announced 100 more Airbus jets. So there are 90 additional A320 family jets and 10 more from A350s. So, do you have a take on that?
At the time the 470 order had come in, the following day there was a statement, a post from a senior Air India official, which was about how they had the option to buy, I think the figure was 370 more planes in addition to the 470 that they had ordered. So we don't have any clarification on whether this is part of that option that they had. But yes, 100 more planes. Again, in the month of October, this news had come out in international media when Airbus released its order and delivery report. There was a figure of 85 from an undisclosed buyer, and an international news organization had done a story about how that was potentially Air India. And we have the confirmation now from Air India coming in of about 100 Airbus aircraft, 10 wide-body A350, and 90 narrow-body A320 family of aircraft. Nothing yet on what the delivery schedule for these aircraft is going to look like. We've had the CEO, Campbell Wilson, recently talk about how they expect deliveries to slow down next year. They're at about 300 planes. Of the 470 that they ordered last year, they have added about 35 Boeing 737 Maxes that have gone to Air India Express and 6 A350s. So that's 41 planes. So that leaves them with 429 from the previous order, add another 100. So that's now 529 for Air India.
I wonder where they'll find the parking spaces.
Parking space, yeah.
Yeah, it's but I hopefully Jaywar opening up. We saw recently validation flights, and hopefully by second half of next year, one can hope Navi Mumbai also opens up. That should definitely help. Another one of your stories recently was involving wet leasing of aircraft. We were
Yeah.
just talking about more aircraft for Air India, but it's not just Air India looking for more aircraft. It's all airlines in India looking for more
Yeah.
aircraft. So you had a very interesting story on revision of wet lease rules. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. Vishal, a couple of months back, the DGCA had invited stakeholder comments on sort of a revised set of rules for wet leasing of planes. The idea is, as we learned from a senior official of the ministry recently, to enable airlines to overcome this sort of supply chain issues that the issues that are hampering aircraft deliveries everywhere all around the world. So we know that Indigo has been wet leasing planes in order to make up for the large number of groundings because of the Pratt and Whitney engines. These groundings were in the range of 70 to 80 planes, but have now come down to closer to 40. And it has about already at least 25 aircraft on wet leases. These are from Turkish airline as well as Qatar and a Latvian-based charter company called SmartLynx Airlines, and also more recently from Corendon, another Turkish airline. But not just Indigo, we've also seen that SpiceJet has off and on been leasing planes on wet leases, including from Indonesia's Sky Anchor airline and also from Turkey's Corendon. So what the ministry says is that we want to enable airlines to overcome the shortage that is there, or the crisis that is there in the market. We don't know yet what the final set of rules will look like. We've been told that the new norms that will sort of streamline wet leasing, that was the word used, would be out very soon. So perhaps this month, but you never know. And one of the things that was mentioned was that, they want to offer sort of more flexibility to airlines. So if they want to, they don't necessarily have to deploy the aircraft that they have wet leased on a specific route. They don't want to restrict them, and they should have the flexibility to deploy them however they wish to. So that was one element that they came out. But let's wait for the final, shape of the new norms.
Good to see the ministry being proactive there for the industry at large. Jagriti, what role do you see for traditional media versus digital platforms as far as aviation journalism is concerned?
Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky question. I mean, I don't know whether I can very accurately answer that question. But all I can say is that aviation is a very niche subject. And while we've seen digital media proliferate in the past few years, even in India, it has been a struggle for them to, get funding and be sustainable. So a lot of the very popular digital platforms are on the brink of either collapse or have cut down, their funds and their activities drastically. And the fact that aviation is so niche doesn't make it easier. So I don't think even in India we have any active digital. There might be blogs that say those who travel, credit card blogs and the travel points, all of those. And but
You're right.
if the,
There
yeah.
is very little aviation journalism focused, even on Substack. It's mainstream journalism, not so much aviation. You're right. Yeah.
So yeah, so even if we have our colleague, Tarun Shukla writing for ET Prime, that is digital, but part of legacy media.
And behind a
Um,
paywall. And behind a paywall.
Yeah, yeah, that happens with my stories as well. And sometimes we don't have access to our own stories. So that's a bit of a pain. So there is the morning context as well. It's a bit of a challenge with the fact that the subject is so niche. How do you monetize it? You get to at global conferences, industry events, you get to meet some of the very popular journalists who are doing some of their independent work, whether it's John Ostrower or Richard Schumann.
Or
These people,
Dominic Gates, path breaking
yeah.
on Boeing, writing for the Seattle Times.
Dominic Gates,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So, but he's mainstream. But I'm talking about all other journalists or Andrea Speth. These people work for multiple organizations and across, media platforms. There's radio also, and there is print as well. There's television broadcasting. So it's a bit of a challenge, and therefore, I think in India, it's mostly if you look at journalism, it's mostly legacy media doing aviation journalism.
You have a keen interest in gender rights. We just heard, how passionately you followed the Adam Harry story, and it's good to know it had a happy ending. How do you think both genders, or if I may say the third gender also, I'm not sure what's the appropriate way to structure it, but how do you think genders are represented in Indian aviation?
One of the figures that gets cited very often is the number of pilots that we have, which is about 14% and 15%, I think, and how that's the highest in the world.
Right.
And recently at an event, Air India and Indigo shared larger figures about their organization, which was more at 50%, the non-flying crew, if you look at.
Correct. Overall
But
organization. Yeah.
yes, overall. But my reading of the situation is that one, there are no women in leadership positions. Akasa, yes, has Priya Mehra and Neelu Khatri, but Akasa is also a smaller airline. I would like Indigo and Air India uh, to sort of pay attention to something like this. And even if you go to big industry events, it's horrible. Women are so underrepresented. Well, I could say women are missing. We've seen 2-3 day long conferences happen, and um, you only have male presenters and male speakers. There has to be a conscious effort, but that is missing, and it's very stark because sometimes, very often now, I also go to auto industry events, and I think they've made a very conscious effort. The presenter will be a woman, and the person who leads the discussion, a moderator, will be a woman, and there will definitely be a woman panelist. And so that sort of conscious effort is missing, even though globally, along with sustainability, women representation in aviation is one of the hottest topics. So that is my reading, as well as the fact that certain roles continue to be very sexist. So look at the cabin crew, for instance. I don't understand why Indigo needs to have only women cabin crew, or or the fact that SpiceJet sometimes uses very misleading representation in their, say, tweets or promos by calling their cabin crew red hot spicy girls and then likening them to food that is served on board, or saying that we use hot and spicy as part of our marketing, this thing, slogans, because we want to talk about the passenger experience that we are extending, and therefore it is somehow okay to use that same language for their cabin crew as well. I find it deeply problematic. And SpiceJet's representation also focuses a lot on their uniform, the fact that they wear short skirts and bare legs, all of that. So these are things that just need some more attention, and if you're portraying your crew like that, you're getting them into trouble, because your marketing is geared towards male passengers, and then there will be incidents on board.
Speaking of crew, a story again you have covered with great passion is the new duty and rest hours for pilots in the skies, right? There has been a significant development recently with DGCA's submission to Delhi High Court. For some of our listeners who might not be aware of all the details, can you give us a primer of what's going on and what's next?
There was a court hearing, and recently before the High Court, and the High Court has asked the DGCA to hold another sort of mediation round between Air India as well as three pilot bodies, to arrive at a consensus on implementing the new norms that govern rest and duty timings for pilots.
So what are both sides saying? What's
Yes.
the pilot side saying? What's the Air India saying?
Yes, okay, I'll come to that. So these norms are globally called FDTL, Flight Duty Time Limitation. And to sort of tell you what both sides are saying, I will have to recap what has been going on from the beginning of this year. So in January, the DGCA came out with a revised CAR, or Civil Aviation Requirement, or simply put, rules for pilot duty hours and rest hours. It made two significant changes. One, a lot of other changes were there, but two of the most significant ones were that the weekly rest for pilots would go up from 36 hours to 48 hours. And the second change resulted in reduced night flying for pilots. So initially, if the night flying was from 0 hours to midnight to 5 a.m., now under the revised rules, even flying from 5 to 6 a.m. would be considered under night flying, which would effectively mean that the amount of night flying that pilots could do would come down, because airlines are not allowed to put them on more than 2 consecutive days of night flying. So this happened in January, excuse me, and the airlines did not quite like that. They wrote to the DGCA saying that and the DGCA gave them a timeline. They said in the next 6 months, by 1st of June, you have to implement the new norms. The airlines did not like this. They went to the DGCA, the Federation of Indian Airlines, which is a grouping of Indian airlines, told the DGCA that the timeline was, too strict, and they needed more time to implement it. They said that implementing the new norms would push their requirement for pilots by 10 to 20%. It would require them to hire 10 to 20% more pilots. And if the rules were implemented in a hurry, they would not be able to utilize their aircraft properly, which would push up airfares. So the DGCA, we spoke to the then head of the DGCA, Vikram Devdutt, on this, and the DGCA was very clear. They said, this is just fear mongering. That's what they said in response to the airlines threatening that airfares would go up. And they said, look, we've done our math. Airlines need about 4 months of time to recruit more pilots, and we've given them 6 months. And so nothing doing. They just have to implement this. But lo and behold, within a few weeks, the DGCA silently made another change to the rules where it dropped the requirement of 6 months or implementation from June 1, which means the airlines could take their own sweet time. The CAR also said that the airlines will inform the DGCA about the timeline that is convenient for them for implementing the new norms, which is a bit silly.
So airlines will tell DGCA what's convenient for them.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
So that's when sort of, the regulator became a bit of a laughing stock, that your responsibility is to be this impartial watchdog, but the entities that you're supposed to regulate, you're essentially asking them for their permission, right? So anyway, these were not implemented, and there was an older case already in the Delhi High Court between two pilot bodies and Air India, and this writ petition on the latest FDTL was filed before them, and the High Court had asked the DGCA to mediate between two entities and come to it. The mediation happened in October, and I think there was another round in November. There were two different rounds, but the DGCA failed to sort of arrive at a consensus. What are the two parties saying? I've told you what the airlines are saying. The airlines are saying that it will, result in hike in airfares, and that this will increase their requirement for the pilots that they need to recruit. Now, what the pilots, they've also made an interesting comment in one of the rounds of consultations where Air India has said that if it will reduce salaries for narrow body pilots. Okay, pilots are not buying this, and they're also saying that, look, we are happy to get a, we are happy to get a pay cut. We all need work-life balance. But what they're saying is that how is it that an airline is suddenly interested in how much salary that pilots are getting, right? But the overarching point that pilots are making is that the regulator's job is to ensure safety, and safety should not become a casualty to commercial interests. So this is where we are, Vishal. In a nutshell, the DGCA has now given them, asked them to do another mediation round, and this time the Delhi High Court has asked the DGCA to do another mediation round, and this time it has clearly said that you have to come to us and tell us about the consensus that you've reached on the timeline.
So implementation date.
Yes. Interestingly, the lawyer for the DGCA in the Delhi High Court said that July would be a convenient timeline for them to implement this, because there were some software upgrades to be made, and pilot training and pilot onboarding, and the judge sort of politely asked whether it could not be done sooner. So let's just see. I think the next hearing is on 23rd of January.
Right. On the face of it, what do you think could be the reason for airlines opposing this? I mean, of course, they'll have to hire more pilots and their costs would go up. But besides that, is there anything else that may trouble airlines in implementing this?
One were to just look at the airline and business perspective, the larger story is that post-pandemic, while airlines are seeing passenger demand grow, there are other constraints. Fuel has been increasing. Fuel cost has been increasing. Taxes have gone up. Airport tariff has increased. It's harder to sort of.
Yeah.
Yes.
So economics is the reason.
Yeah, but if you look at the pilots side of things, what they say is that they haven't seen like a salary hike in 5-6 years, whereas their flying has gone up exponentially. Doing four sectors, which is what most pilots talk about, is the most excruciating thing to do. It has become a norm. So four sectors would mean at least 10 hours of flying. So they say, how is it that post-COVID, the passenger demand growth is very robust and airfares have gone up, you know, and our salaries have not seen an increase in the past 5, 6
Got it.
years. Vishal, I mean, post-pandemic, all of us across sectors are now more acute and sensitive about work-life balance. And that somehow doesn't exist for uh, both pilots and crew, anybody who's sort of not on a ground job.
Hmm.
So within that context is where all this discussion could also be placed.
My final question to you, and work-life balance is again a good segue to journalism. What advice
Hmm.
would you give to someone aspiring to enter aviation journalism, Jagriti?
My God, can I say don't do it?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know what to say. So aviation journalism is fancy and it's glamorous. It's good to you get enough opportunity to travel around the world and and also sort of interact with global CEOs as well as your own airline CEOs. And it's a fascinating field, and it's infectious because I would say I'm not even an AvGeek, but I'm surrounded by all these AvGeeks who will make you fall in love. I'm like, what? Why are you guys obsessing about engines and flaps and
You're an
wings?
app geek
What?
now.
So I don't know. Like I if yeah, I mean, if you were to sit Vasuki next to me, he will just like rag me. Um, so yes, so it's a fascinating field. It's very sort of the excitement around it is very infectious, and it is every aspect of it is so technical. Be
Awesome.
it commercial, be it network, be it the engineering aspect, be it like the flying all these machines, everything is so super technical and there is so much to learn. It's fascinating. So yes, the energy and excitement is very infectious as far as aviation is concerned, and all that is fun. You're telling stories, people open up about their own life experiences of flying, etc., and all that is very good and very exciting. You get a front row seat to policy changes and industry developments that are happening. So it's very enjoyable, but I also want to say what I was told by my journalism professors as well as my seniors in the industry is that you need some sort of a support system. Writing and journalism is some it's after a certain point of time a hobby, right? One term that I do not subscribe to that gets used very often is that you need a sugar daddy to pursue journalism, but I don't subscribe to that. You need some sort of a support system, either a parental support system or something, or like I see journalists hustling a lot, doing multiple projects. And so I would also like to sort of bring this sort of note of realism if somebody is thinking of becoming an aviation journalist.
Very insightful. Thank you for that, Jagriti. And thank you for the last 35, 40 minutes of fantastic conversation. Really appreciate your time and talking to us.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for having me on this podcast. I really loved your questions, and it really got me thinking about a lot of things I had not thought of.
Talking with Jagriti was a delight, and it was interesting to hear her talk about things which we have never ever discussed on the show. That reminds me, our show next week will be a special year end show. We will focus on all the major highlights of the year, so stay tuned for that one. And while tuning in, do not forget to take out few seconds, rate us and leave us a feedback. This show streams on all major podcast apps. And with that, I wish you well and happy flying, my friends.